Well, my origin story and who I am are kind of different, but I started out, I think, as an aspiring musician and ultimately a professional musician. So from fourth grade, that was my only goal. I had a son in '95, and that's when I said, look, this is where I need to pivot for sure. And that's where I had no idea what to do, because at that point, pivoting in the music industry and not going on the road didn't really make a lot of sense like it could potentially today. And so the world was my oyster. I just thought of anything and everything. I'd since fourth grade never even considered doing anything else, and had some cops that used to come out, and I had a side gig where I went and played when I was off the road, and some cops used to follow me around there, and they talked me into cutting all my hair off and joining a PD. I got out and started hitting the streets and doing everything that I could to get experience in some of the worst parts of the neighborhoods in the city, and learned from guys who had written warrants, and eventually got my big white stiff ass into the narcotics unit about 5 years in, and started doing undercover buys and stuff, and just kind of leveraged my own personality, honestly. I decided whimsically, hey, I'm going to go in undercover and try to infiltrate these guys, and we'll beat them from the inside out. And upon bringing that up to both my boss and an informant who I'd started working with, they each individually burst out in laughter at separate opportunities, because obviously me suggesting that I go in and infiltrate the Crips doesn't seem like the smartest idea, nor very practical. I ultimately worked my way in, spent damn near 2 years working deep undercover every single day of the week, and infiltrated them posing as a high-end dope dealer from South Texas who had just had my sources busted by the feds. And so I was coming out starting kind of a new game altogether, so that I would appear kind of as a opportunity rather than a target. And after obviously working past all the 20 questions and all that kind of stuff, I began kind of working my way in, spending days where I didn't have money. I would spend down on the blocks and just visiting with these cats and ask for somebody that I knew not to be there. And they would say he's not there. And then we'd have, we share 40s, or I'd beat their ass at Madden or something, getting this street cred established in the most unique ways on a limited budget. So ultimately, that's kind of the story that kind of moved my career shifts and everything at that point. That 2 years burnt me out. The emotional toll and everything of arresting these people that I'd gotten to know over 2 years was really upsetting, and as much of an accomplishment as it was still an emotional time for me. So, my family was great, but struggling with this kind of work. I mean, this is impractical to keep a family together too, to be undercover for that long period of time. It's something that usually doesn't occur. And so I bailed and started a company doing private security and protection work. And that was kind of setting another turn. I mean, my whole life has been just taking 180s and going in different directions. And so I thought this was a completely different one, where I just stuck myself into, how to build a business. And it was less about the tactical stuff that I'd learned and applying those, and more about learning how to build a business so that by the time we grow the business, I can keep these people feeding their families as well. So that's 18 some years ago. And ultimately what happened was that I went back and wrote a book about the experience I had undercover with the Crips. And so following that, I had, I wasn't inspired to write a book, as, doing undercover work is kind of a selfless thing. I mean, nobody knows who you are. So you do your thing, and you're doing it with a purpose, and that's that. So I wasn't going to write a Batman book. But then we discovered that there were, of those 51 people that we arrested, there were 104 kids left fatherless in that same area where all the violence was occurring. And that became the purpose of writing the book, and kind of propelled my mission going forward in all the other endeavors that I did. So I wrote the book that just kind of memorializes that whole 2 years undercover. And then we donate all the profits from every book sale to charities that mentor children of incarcerated parents. And that's kind of where my story is. Once I got through, back in 2016, 17, I had one of my old bandmates moved back from New York to Dallas, and we started doing some movie and TV production music, and I got way addicted back into the music thing again. Got some attention from regarding the book here in LA, and was flying out here to LA all the time, and had it actually assigned when COVID hit and that deal fell apart, because they had to rush Aretha. They did the Aretha movie too, so they had to rush it into final production and try to get it out while the theaters were still open, which didn't actually happen. And that deal fell apart. That's when I decided, let me try podcasting, and that was the motivation behind kind of starting the podcast at first, was to try to see if I could establish some personal IP. And me being the introvert and self-conscious person, I thought this is the easier way for me to promote myself, is by highlighting other people whom I admire that have really cool stories that I can kind of deflect off myself and allow people to see the types of things that inspire me. Well, my podcast is actually now called the Tegan Broadwater Podcast. It's taken several generations through naming and everything else, but it's for independent thinkers who are wanting to contribute to positive change. In doing so, we just highlight people with really incredible stories, or stories of themselves or accomplishments that we highlight that magnify the fact that the specific guests that we have are so diverse and unique that normally you would tune into a channel and see a girl with green hair and you'd want to change it, but you would stick to it because it's my podcast. And you know that we're going to tie in her, and we're going to tie in the dude in the suit, and we're going to make you realize that we're much more alike than we are different. And essentially that's what it's about. Well, the thought process involved many different consultants also, because I knew not a damn thing about what I was doing when I started this thing, obviously. And I knew that was the purpose. I've even kind of refined the purpose, as much as I did a real poor job of actually pitching that thing very succinctly. Ultimately, what it is that I ended up having a book, and I'm putting out music, and I have a company, and I have all these other things. And a lot of the consultants kept coming back and saying, you need to talk a little bit more about yourself, because people that tune in will appreciate your guests, but if they don't know anything about you, how are they going to trust you and trust the show and give it a better shot? And so trying to figure out ways for me to do that without necessarily reverting back to the, hey, let me talk about myself to everybody, was to at least tie in the name to where if you Google my name, you can find the business, you can find the book, you can trace it to the music and all these different things that we're doing. And it just kind of aligns everything a little easier for people to find, what I'm about. Because it was really just all over the place with all those different projects going, and you're calling this, the music is TCAD, and the book is Tegan, and then you've got the podcast is Uncommon Souls, and I'm trying to tie all these things in together because we still have a similar, if not exact mission, which is to bring people together so that, as a community, we can impact positive change, just having people that are tuning in at the same time or listening to the same things, or, diversifying what they listen to and watch. So it all has the same kind of purpose. And so a lot of these brand strategists were like, dude, you were all over the place with all these different names. And I would find myself trying to tell people about different things. And whether you have a card or a QR code or whatever, I was just having to, well, you're going to get to this page and it's going to have all these different things on it, but they're all the same thing that we're trying to do. It just made no tactical sense in a business sense. I've had different experiences. One fantastic experience I can attest was Houston Howard, who is kind of one of the pioneers of transmedia. So he was able to look at my projects and tie them together in a way that kind of stages how you release things and still will bring people in, as opposed to having one finite project that then could lead to starting another project, et cetera. So it's kind of a different approach when you're looking for investors or trying to get people to listen to one thing. So if I have a book and I have music and I have a podcast and we have a business and we have a charitable arm, and all those things can bring people to the same core center. And he was teaching me strategic ways, business wise, to tie all those things in. He's still magnificent at doing that stuff. So I felt like for me, it was a great education. It's not necessarily cheap, but the reason I mentioned his name is because the money was well spent. He spends a lot of time honing in on your specific issues and ways that we can apply those concepts. So he was magnificent. I know how people can really have a hesitation about spending money before you really know what you're going to get. And that's kind of the conundrum with having consultants. But if you ever feel like looking up Houston Howard, you can find him on, a lot of different, mediums and being interviewed and things like that might be able to do enough research on him to make a decision about whether or not you might consult with him. Yes, I'm just trying to think of the numbers of ways. One is, again, I grew up a peace-loving, long-haired musician and everything's cool, whatever. I think it's almost like maybe a kid that's just kind of all over the place that goes into the military and then all of a sudden, finds his disciplinary lane. It didn't, I was a very atypical cop because I still was peace-loving, just didn't have the long hair. But I learned also how to apply a level of confidence and trust myself a little bit more and speak a little bit more directly. I felt like I had, a pliable personality, but it was pretty hippie compared to, being in a business. And podcasting is a business. And if you're kind of wishy-washy about how you're approaching your questions or you're asking a guest, to come on the show and you're having to pitch yourself or whatever, a lot of that, you have to translate some of that confidence, even if you feel like an imposter, which I still always do, but it's still a wonderful opportunity and I know how to kind of present myself. So I think I definitely brought that. I also feel like I have a lot of empathy and to certain situations, because I've got some very distressed guests. I have some very learned and accomplished guests, and I feel like I've seen a lot that I would not have experienced life-wise otherwise. When people talk about seeing their first dead body or being shot at or, some crazy experiences that I would have never been able to base anything on. I think it changes your perspective on life when someone tries to take your life. It changes the way you think about everything, as long as you're kind of level-headed and not going in a way that, a bad cop would. I think my personality was, absorbing that and taking it forward in a positive way. Look at what I'm trying to bring people together so that as a community, we're more inclined to listen to other people and make a more open-minded decision about going in one direction or the other. Even if we disagree, if we're sitting at the table and having a mature conversation, then that's the goal. And that's what my whole podcast is predicated on. And most people, even if that's not the specific direction, that's the causation of, getting people to sit in the first place. And music is the ultimate equalizer. There's lots of different genres and lots of different tastes, but when you find people who really appreciate music and find massive inspiration through different aspects of music, whether it's just a beat or the chord structure or the lyrics or the whatever, but people are moved by music without having to say a lot. And so I think that demonstrates, man, if we could all just listen to different kinds of music and have a greater appreciation for where it came from and what persons are trying to say, who are the artists. And I think that correlation is direct. It's just a completely different medium to tackle. Yeah, that's something I'm still learning to do, but I think everybody kind of has their own way of putting their schedules together. One thing that I think creatives struggle with a lot, and trust me, I'm a creative, and my head is always like jumping to new things, and I get distracted. I told my wife this morning, hey, you need some Advil? She goes, yes. And then 20 minutes later, I remembered, I went into the kitchen to get Advil, but I ended up doing something else. I completely lost my train of thought. So I ran back in there and got the Advil. I have to organize myself in a way that I have a calendar that lists everything I need to accomplish. And then I'll have a second calendar that lists the really important things that I need to get done at a very specific time. And I force myself to look and see what it is, almost as if I have a boss saying, at 6:30 you have to do this, or else you're 7:30 you're going to be late. Being on time and punctual and respecting other people's time has a magnificent effect on how successful you are. So I kind of practice that even with myself. It's just a discipline you have to practice. And I know a lot of creatives struggle with stuff like that. But the creatives that, my old bandmates and stuff who are all, playing in uber successful gigs and stuff, our bass players out here who visit every time I come out here. He plays for The Who, Sheryl Crow, all these people. But he's disciplined. I grew up with the dude playing in bands in our 20s, and he's 20 minutes early, and he's already learned all the parts, even though you haven't paid him. He's not on the clock yet, but he comes in and makes the the session efficient, and is really personality wise, he's wonderful. Not everybody can change that, about themselves, but he's already established himself as a virtuoso on his instrument and a disciplinarian on his business end. So that's how you succeed. And that's kind of the way I look at it. So when we have, I've got a company now with 75 employees, and they can't understand why if they don't, I don't have any more vacation time, but I just can't be there on Saturdays. So just don't pay me. And you have to go back and explain like why that doesn't work and how many people are relying on us and we can't take days off because this and this and this. I find it kind of interesting to see, these younger kids that are coming through, whether they're out of the military or whatever, they're 24 years old and they just don't understand how things work. So sometimes you have to just back off and explain how that is. And you can't do things like that if you're not practicing those disciplines. So I think for the most part, when I'm all over the place, I literally have a page that has my to-do lists for the week, and it's divided into 4 sections plus notes for things that don't fit into a category. And that's the only way I can do it. I've got my music goals, I got my, TSN security business goals, I got the podcast goals, I've got, I'm still writing every week too, because I feel like, writing the book made me better, and going through the process of writing movies and stuff like that made me better at that too. So I'm consistently trying to force myself to write creatively, whether it's a story of myself or a story about a thought or something. So I've got my Substack goals or whatever it is, and I have to force myself to sit down as if it's on the schedule, or my boss just told me, hey, have this done by 5, or it won't get done. You either want to do it or you don't. If we could all just kind of hang out and do it on our own time, that'd be great. But you look back and then realize, man, if I had made myself do this every day, even for 20 minutes, and 5 years passes you by fast, and you look back and say, dude, if I only did 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week, 5 years long, I would be already badass at this. Why am I telling myself I need to put this on my calendar? Just freaking put it on there and start doing it. It's actually simpler than it seems. It's just not something you prefer. Your brain would rather sit back and say, look, that's a little bit stressful, but at least it's yourself forcing yourself into that instead of somebody else actually making you go out into, speaking on a stage and whatever, whatever your goal is, you've got to do it incrementally, but force yourself to turn it into a habit. That's a great question, because sometimes I still pinch myself like, he said yes. I started just with friends and just starting. I think part of it is just starting and just not thinking about how far down the road you can do X, Y, Z. And then leverage. I learned some of the stuff from my dad, who was great at sales and stuff like that. And he would say, hey, as soon as you get one thing that's even remotely an accomplishment, then you're always leveraging that as a stepladder to get to the next. Like, oh, I just finished talking with Pablo Escobar's son, and we got a lot of cool stuff, and it made me think of you, blah, blah, blah. And then, bam, all of a sudden, I was lucky to come across him. But the other things that I was doing at the time are what brought me into that. That would be the good example of, I got asked to work on a documentary involving Pablo Escobar's kid. as potentially doing some of the music for the documentary. So I was sitting in on all these meetings, just listening to this guy talk about these stories that I grew up just so fascinated with. And so I leverage his name in a lot of my promotional materials because, one, I know, he and I enjoy each other's company. He's a great dude also, but you got to leverage one thing after the next. And part of it, again, is going forward with that confidence and organization that we have already talked about. You got to be confident enough to ask. I have some text groups with, my old band, including those guys I talked about, and a couple other guys, and we're constantly sharing really fascinating things. And sometimes my friend will say, "Hey, dude, this guy would be perfect on your podcast or whatever." And, so I take things like that, and I've shared and reciprocated things like that. The last guy I interviewed, I shared with that friend group, and I was like, "Man, you guys are going to be blown away by this guy. It's unbelievable." And, and my friend Kirk was like, "Dude, you gotta get him on your show." I'm like, "Are you freaking kidding me? I told you, I just found this dude and they have 1 million views and everything else." So, but my wife is constantly that one in my head saying, "Why are you pretending like you can't?" Part of it is really that. It's asking yourself, it's the imposter syndrome knocking on the front door when the whole time inside that you would do a good job. I'm going to be a nervous wreck. I'm not going to eat for 2 days leading up to it. But that's part of it. Do I want to do it or not? And I do. And so, even writing an invite letter causes me anxiety. So I don't want people to say, "Well, I'm not like this," or, I don't have this kind of extra confidence. I'm an introvert and fight that every day, but this is still something I want to do. And I do feel like I'm getting better at it, but man, I deal with the same kind of nerves. And you'd think coming up with an email, which I feel like I'm actually pretty good at, wouldn't cause you strife, but man, just the thought of having to compose an email and ask somebody who you're almost positive is going to say no. It's not even the no that I'm worried about. I don't know what I'm worried about. So finally, at the behest of my wife, who's like, "Why are you overthinking this? Ask him. He would be great on your show." And I'm like, "Okay, well, in its essence, he would be a great fit on my show. I think I could get along with this guy. I think I have some really good questions for this guy." So get out of your head and stop thinking about the universe and start focusing on what you're trying to do. And if you get no's along the way, cool, but you're going to get stronger with every pitch. And I think that's honestly how it's kind of come to be, is that I knew some decent folks. I built on that. And then once you get one pretty good one, and I say pretty good one with all due respect, you know what I mean? You're talking about popular people that have their own audience or something. Once you get that one, you leverage that one in your next pitch and say, "Look, we just finished doing so-and-so." And they're like, "Okay, well, that's some credibility at that point." All you're doing is building on, whether it's a local credibility because, hey, this restaurant owner is somebody that's kind of famous in my own city or whatever it is. You build on that and then you work outside of your city. If you're in Fort Worth or Dallas and we say, "Hey, we just talked to so-and-so in Austin and, got the biggest barbecue joint in Austin." Well, people know about the biggest barbecue joint in Austin because Texas folk talk about barbecue. So that could be something, depending on what your topics are. I would absolutely leverage that. Just stop thinking about how everybody else does it and the fact that you're a small fish, and start acting like the person that you are becoming. That's an interesting one because, I just now decided to make this a business and hire an agent, which I'm sure is another question down the road. But she asked the same question, obviously, because she's wanting to look out for me too and find some guests or find shows that I need to be on or whatever. It's all right now kind of intuitive. The fact that the platform is kind of diverse lets my world be open. So, if I feel like I've gotten like an influx of law enforcement guests, which I kind of had right now, then I want to focus more on making sure that we're still hitting other areas. So that's kind of the only conscious effort I will make. But, tomorrow, one of my favorite musicians of all time, I'll be in this studio tomorrow with him. And, that's something that I push for because I'm willing to fly out here to LA to meet him in person and have this conversation. So I just feel like when I look at it as a whole, I'll look at who I've spoken to in what proximity to make sure I'm diversifying enough based on what my pledge is, which is, you're going to find a lot of wide-ranging people with wide-ranging opinions, but all incredible human stories that kind of bring us together. So the only conscious decision I make is in the field of expertise or the types of stories that I'm highlighting in a certain order if I tend to be going one direction, which is kind of easy to do because in my case, you get a couple of really good law enforcement type or criminal types, then all of a sudden you're a true crime channel if you're not careful. And there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just trying to stay diversified. You might talk to me in 2 years and I might say that experiment didn't work, but I'm determined to stay diverse. And what my podcast does is reflect my own interests. So it's kind of cheap, but it keeps it authentic because, again, this is one of my favorite musicians of all time. But I know a lot of people know him and a lot of people don't know him. So my whole objective is for somebody to tune in and see what this dude's about. After my last episode was with a Crip who I put in prison or whatever. And then now I've got this musician. I mean, it's a left turn, but for my channel, it's not because the conversations kind of flow the same way. That's the easiest question, even though it's kind of deep. Starting is the hardest part of starting because, and I know to this day, a lot of people in the same boat. They haven't figured out lighting yet. They don't have a good camera. They don't know how to do anything. All they have is a phone. It's going to look goofy and they're trying to do something that's going to be big time production. They feel like they're not an expert in their field, but they're going to be acting like one as soon as they put themselves out there and present this. And that's the problem because you're never going to be an expert until you start putting in the work, and you have to start putting in the work by starting putting in the work. So and it is the hardest point. It was my hardest thing too. I struggle with it. I'm like, man, hell, I'm not a journalist. I mean, essentially that's what you're doing. So, just putting yourself in that role in general, look, you've got athletes and, all kinds of people all over the place doing this podcasting. Well, they're not journalists either. Everybody struggles with this. And nobody's trying to judge how good or bad the interviewer is. They may subconsciously, but really that's not really the focus. But I will say that the better you get at it, they'll start noticing that you're particularly good at it. So, and the only way to get good at something is just keep doing it. So I would just encourage people to start with whatever equipment you have or can afford. Just start putting it out there. You'll get better at it and you'll figure it out. If you had all the right equipment, you'd still suck on your first one anyway. I still suck on my umpteenth ones anyway. So, I have a hard time looking at myself. We have to review to try to see, what intros we want to put and stuff. So I'm constantly having to look at it, but I do feel like I've gotten a whole lot better than I did before. Being with yourself just, again, makes your mind try to shut it down because it's a lot more comfortable to just blow it off and wish you had done it. But yeah, starting actually just initiating the first thing and just putting it out there for the world to see. I mean, my whole intention was to put some IP together for a different thing. So what I was wrong about was that it really is fulfilling to me. I didn't ever think that it was going to be something that I pursued as a business or pursued in a way that really, really inspired me to do other things and put myself out there, put so much work into continuing the project. So I thought it sounded like kind of a cool thing. It was, something that I felt like it would be comfortable for me to jump into. I still had no business doing it any more than anybody else. But that's the most thing is that you can start these things and just have the attitude of, man, if I'm serving my soul and I can serve one other soul, then your purpose is kind of already on its way to being fully accomplished. And so I really do think it's fulfilling, really. It's challenging, it's fulfilling, it's constantly keeping me learning, just having a guest than me trying to crank through 2 of their books or spending 8 hours trying to learn more about them. I mean, what a great challenge. I mean, I just realized, wow, this is awesome. Probably a lot. One, that I can do this. I think I'm to the point now where I feel like, wow, I can do this. You can give me any guest you want at this point, and I'm not even the most experienced guy, but you can give me any guest you want, and I think I would do a good job. I mean, I might be the best at it, but I think I'm getting good at this, and I really care about the job that I do and the presentation for the guests. So I've certainly learned that, and the skill of actually interviewing and coming up with unique questions without just saying, hey, ChatGPT, spit out some whatever. I've seen those shows too. We're like, oh my gosh, that's a ChatGPT question if I ever heard one, right? But searching deep for some really good questions, and you're looking inside yourself and trying to think about how you can elicit some of the coolest things from these people. And I think I'm getting better at that because I'm genuinely curious, and I think my curiosity kind of comes across too. But I think mostly I've figured out that I think I can do this, and that's more than I could have said when I started. Several things. I would have just followed the advice of the first person that told me, just put your name on this podcast and just use your name. But we've already learned about that. I probably would have started earlier too, because I didn't take my own advice. Just effing do it. I don't know. I mean, I felt my way through so much of it that if I went back and gave myself advice right now, I think I would sell myself short because I really had to learn by doing, and the things that didn't work were convincing when you do it and you do it wrong. It's very convincing to yourself. It's not like, you don't have to, if it doesn't, what doesn't kill you will make you stronger, obviously, but it's not like I made, horrible mistakes, but it's just some of the subtleties in this thing. And I'm sure people way more experienced than me would tell me this same thing, is just those little things that you change and you tweak come with practice. And so I wouldn't change a ton more. I started out doing just a handful of audio podcasts. So, I mean, I could have made those video too, just with cheap video. I think I started audio because I had a recording setup for my music stuff already. But then again, that's also fine too. So I'm kind of cool with that too. So that's probably all I would change, because I'd leave a lot of the rest of it just for me to actually learn it. This is still something I struggle with. I'm talking with a guy recently too, who's talking about you could do lives on this and do this and this and this. I haven't done a live yet. I still struggle with a lot of aspects where I feel like I may be able to excel. Maybe it will be great, and I'll wish I'd always done it. At the very least, I should probably try it and see how it goes. But ultimately right now is that I just hover over the comments. And if anybody says anything, even if it's one of my more popular ones, I might have some that have thousands and thousands of comments, and I'll look down, once every couple hours and have to answer 15, 20, 30 messages. I will answer them all unless it's just advantageous not to, for, somebody's trolling you or whatever, just ignore it. But I think being responsive and being the person, especially, I mean, that's the quickest way to establish any kind of rapport, or at least let people know that you appreciate that they're even taking time to make a comment. Because you get tons of people that will watch it, like it, not even push like, and not even make a comment. So that effort these days is actually really something that you want to praise them for. And I also try really hard to appreciate their opinions, even if I disagree. So I try to be very open and say, I appreciate the fact that you took time to share this. I don't agree with this one aspect, but then again, I could be wrong too, whatever. If just the whole point is to have the conversation and welcome in people that have different opinions. That's why we're here. So that's the only real great communication. I do have an email list that I am working on being more consistent with, and I need to put that on my calendar list. And that is kind of a compilation of things, whether it's a new music release or, a new writing or something that's happened that might be interesting. They can get on the mailing list, and on a weekly basis, I'll keep in touch with people that way. But I find I still get a lot more comments specific to what I'm doing, when I do the podcast. And again, didn't always have them. So the first one that comes in, set your notifications so that you're the first one to see that it comes through. I'm really proud of myself when I can get something that pops up. And then as soon as it pops up, I'm able to just look at it real quick and respond to it. Because then people have come back and said, wow, this is great. You're the first guy that's ever been the host of the show to actually respond to a message. It's great when they start side conversations and stuff too, which always hasn't been the case for me. I don't always have enough people watching these shows to actually let alone comment and start side conversations. So if there's any opportunity to start a conversation, then I jump in there. And, I might suggest even try to figure out a question that you could ask them so that you can learn a little bit more about your audience. Analytics are great, but if you have somebody that says, hey, dude, that's really soulful, I dig it, then say, man, I appreciate that. What do you normally listen to? Start your own conversation. You should be interested in the type of people that are interested in this stuff. So that's a great question because I've just tried to counsel myself through the beginning. I mean, even when I released the book, we had people from the hood, which we arrested all these people coming in, and the ones that weren't sending death threats to my phone were jumping on social media and trying to be critical about my intentions and I'm evil and this and that. And it was really hurtful, but I wasn't social media savvy either. And I would lose sleep over some of these goofy comments, even knowing they're not true. I think that's part of what tormented me. Is like, I know that this isn't true. They're saying what they're saying. I can try to convince them or try to ignore them. I think over time, it gets a lot better. And I say a lot better, not that you get less criticism, but that you get used to the fact that I think when you visualize who's talking to you, you visualize someone significant saying these ridiculous things to you. And when in reality, if you'll just picture some idiot in his basement that's doing this on a daily basis and realizing this is the kid that I'm never going to convince anything to because he's a loser, then it doesn't hurt your feelings at all. So I think it's the way you mentally frame the comments that come in and decide whether or not it's worth a fight. I've had people comment on my hair. So, hey, I'm grateful to have hair. And I know I'm wearing a 90s haircut, whatever, because I don't want to do a side part and look like any more of a nerd than I already am. And I don't care. So I just stick it up there. So people will make comments about my hair and I'll say, hey, I'm trying to do what I can do. I'm old, but I'm trying not to get old. And if I'm dating myself, thanks for, reminding me that I'm dating myself or whatever. And a lot of times, honestly, the self-deprecation is endearing to them. They're like, dude, I was just kidding, whatever. When it was actually a rude comment, but they come back and realize, oh, this guy's talking to me. He's just a dude. And, that's who you are. So try to do as much of that as you can. Don't take it all super personally and then square in the really super negative, ridiculous comments. Get your avatar set to where that is the idiot that nobody cares to talk to anyway, and then it will hurt your feelings significantly less. I don't have super extraordinary stories from subscribers. I think most of my subscribers that I end up ignoring are politicizing something. And you can instantly just detect, okay, this is just one of those extremist ideas people. And those are people I don't care to have as followers anyway, because, we're trying to bring people, the rest of us, I think the most of us that don't scream every day are, in the middle enough to where we can have conversations. I mean, I've been called a murderer and, which is, again, I almost don't even understand it. But if I do something and then somebody gets pissed off that they expose this and then they murder them, that's a big deal, I guess. But like, let me know what you're talking about. Obviously, I'm not a murderer, and man, I don't. I mean, I was on a long time ago. My wife would insist I tell this story because she thinks it's awesome. But I was on Cops in '99, and I got a few pair of panties and some candy and all kinds of stuff from that TV show. But when you're young, maybe I was disguised as someone handsome at the time. I don't know. But that was pretty whack. They'd said that stuff in the mail, and I'd bring it home to my wife and say, "You open this, I'm scared to open it." So we got a kick out of some of that. And that's more humorous than it was torturous. But otherwise, honestly, I think really it is just political extremists, people that'll, based on something I say or something I post, they'll say something really hardcore anti-American, or that I'm a murderer and I support this and this and this. And it's honestly, the more extreme it is, the less concerning it is to me. It's concerning in general that we have that many extremists out there, and we see them every day. I'm sure it makes everybody nervous, but it doesn't make me nervous personally because, again, I don't welcome those people anyway. I'm looking for people that want to actually have a conversation, not somebody that's going to say, "Hey, if you're anti-American, that's great. I know we got all kinds of problems. Just go somewhere else if you want to, whatever." But I don't even tell them that. I just ignore it. Well, see, I would feel self-conscious being the organizer and then still trying to insert myself. But part of the beauty of that would be able to play with these cats. I would take on any musical opportunity to be on a stage with those guys. I've had these conversations many a time. I can tell you that the vocalist will be here tomorrow. That's who I would pick for my vocalist of all time, Doug Pinnick. He's got a soulful, raspy, and rockable everything voice, just so diverse and incredible vocalist. It's funny. And it depends on the style, honestly. This is where my problem is that I love so many different types of music, honestly. I would have to put my rock outfit over here. I got a soul outfit over here. Because, who's your favorite drummer? Who's your favorite guitar player? I mean, all those things are taste-based, yes, but they're also stylistically based. You want somebody that does this the best. And so that's kind of the beauty of the music, is that I learned when I was in music school, we had Vinny Colaiuta come do, who's a session drummer, played with Zappa, came through, played with Sting, blah, blah, blah. He's on 90 million records and just the jazz fusion king of the world. If you ask drummers who's the greatest drummer of all time, he would be in the conversation every time you bring it up. And him playing this crazy, sophisticated stuff in 1916 with Frank Zappa was one thing. And then when you hear him play with Sting and he's laying down the first beat that everyone learns when they're in fifth grade, but you realize you can still tell it's him. That's the beautiful subtlety of music, is when you can tell somebody's really good is when they play something simple, they can make the simplest thing beautiful. So that's why I think it would be damn near impossible to say, this is the band. I mean, I could put together several bands on a tour like that. That sounds like such a fun thing too. And I'd love to pick people that are kind of, I would say, second tier in terms of popularity. It's easy to pick the biggest artist of the years, but I think that's the beautiful thing and the complicated thing when you ask that question, because there's too much subtlety and too much grand appreciation for a wide array of people that could do an equally wonderful job at it to put it in a box. Yeah, it's not even going to take years at this point, because there are there's an album that popped up in my algorithm that was tagged, 70s progressive something or other. So the only reason I clicked, I saw some of the hashtags. I started listening to it. And I'm like, how the hell have I never heard this singer? This dude was like, this is not Ian Gillan, but it sure as hell sounds like Ian Gillan circa 1970. And he was just killing it. And the bands, you could hear the hiss of the tape and the band's jamming. And so I listened. By the end of the fourth tune, just instinctively, I was like, I don't even know what it is. And this is the first time, normally people are like, you got to hear this AI. This one, it just hit my algorithm on a natural whim. I got 4 tunes in before I decided to do a deep dive and find out that it wasn't. And so I sent it to my bandmates, the bass player from here. All these guys are all professionals and making a living in music. I said, dude, I just want y'all to check this stuff out. This is insane. Have y'all ever heard of this? And that's all I put in there. And I started getting back, the guitar player's incredible. That's, it's great. Whatever. And again, it's not perfect, which is what makes it sound human. The singer hit these high notes, but it'll kind of fall off a little bit, a little flat, but it's still badass. And I had to come back and we started this long chain. I was almost wish we had them on camera having this conversation, being brothers in music, because they didn't know. And that's where it gets scary, because we're going to be able to emulate this stuff. And AI's happening so fast, we're going to end up with podcasters too doing the same thing. You have a podcaster much more handsome than this that figures out what kind of questions are cool. And then you're going to be able to do all these remote things. And then somebody can send in their answers and put their emoji up. And you think you're just watching this for actual podcast too. It's crazy. It's super scary. And I feel good that I've experienced the trajectory of how you have to put in work for certain things, including this podcast. 2020's a recent time, but if you think of how AI played a role, it's not even close between 2020 and now. Not even close. How many months ago was it when that band came out and everyone's like, oh my gosh, they sound like a real band. But you knew in advance that it was AI when you listened to it the first time. And now I'm getting stuff that I damn well should know better and listen to that many tunes before I even have a suspicion. And I still think, subconsciously, it could have been a note or something that sounded weird for a vocal range or a guitar or something could have sounded. Every once in a while, you get some of those notes. It's weird that would take a keen ear. But I was still just convinced that a singer this badass would have been in my mind already. Like, I already know who that dude is. There's no way, even if it was underground, because I've listened to so much music and the 70s are just so great. They're just so raw and so whatever. There's no way I've never even heard this dude's name or something. So I said, please don't be AI. And it freaking was. So yeah, we're headed down that road too. I think podcasting wise, that's why it's really important to have kind of your purpose and mission really figured out, because unless it's about AI, which would make it kind of an interesting aspect to kind of follow also, is to kind of narrate the AI progress and have kind of an open conversation about how good it's doing and demonstrate some of that would be an interesting way to go about it. Have a human kind of judging and commentating on its progress and what's discernible and not. Otherwise, it's just literally that, it's a human authenticity that people have to eventually crave, that you can only hope. You can only hope. So when it comes to music and stuff, if you think about people that listen to whatever the radio spits out, then they're not going to care if it's good or not, or if it's human or not, or they're not purposely listening to music in order to, give credit to an artist. That's what artists do. Artists listen to other artists and look at other artists and have that appreciation. And, that's not going to help anybody. Artists aren't the ones that have the big bucks that are selling their paintings and everything else. So I'm worried that by this time next year, it's already going to be in full swing. And unless we have regulations, it's going to already be doing, because it's getting cheaper too. You see movie makers doing stuff and then, the actor's dead and they put the actor in there and you don't know otherwise. But once that becomes inexpensive, then it's, and that's what's happening with AI. The capability becomes cheaper and more accessible. And then before you know it, whoever's going to make whatever they dream up, and they want attention for attention's sake versus attention to build a brand that has a purpose, then we're all kind of screwed. We just multiply the pool of people that we're trying to draw attention for. Figure out at least why you want to do it. If your purpose or mission aren't super well defined, at least define kind of why you want to do it first, and then get the guts to just do it. Don't wait until you have the right equipment. Don't wait until you figure out how to use the dang camera that you do have or whatever. Just do it. I'd still would encourage people to do it. It as dark as this conversation went, we would be remiss if we didn't encourage people to express and be artful and creative. And this is a creative outlet for people, and I think it's important that we maintain it. So you're welcomed into the fold. I hope these big timers would also say the same thing, like welcome in. It's never too late, and that the more humans we have learning and expressing and creating, the better. So all I can say is, if you're focused on that though, and you have kind of your mission and your purpose for doing it, then you can stay in your lane and be less concerned about how much this thing's hitting on your first 10 episodes and you hardly have anybody watching or whatever, because if you'll stay focused on why you're doing it, I think you'll be successful, at least to the extent that your creative sense is being fulfilled and you're doing it for the right reasons. And again, if we can go through a bunch of work and do this creative stuff and help at least one person become enlightened, that should be fulfilling anyway. So that's kind of what we're shooting for. Man, I just shared a bunch of my dark ones, but I do think there's room for everybody. I've been in the same boat too, where you start thinking, man, I even if I have a guest and I start researching the guest and I realize, oh man, this dude's been on 58 podcasts. The fact is, there are so many humans that are engaging in this stuff that you're going to put it out and find a brand new audience for this person as well as a brand new audience for yourself. So I think perspective is always key when you're doing podcasting stuff. You obviously want to grow, but again, just focus on the perspective and purpose, and then know that it's valuable stuff that you're putting out.